All right. Looks like we're pretty much ready to get started. So I'll go ahead and launch us off. So really excited to be here this afternoon with everyone. We are doing our social media and social emotional learning part 2 forum with some amazing guest speakers today. I am so excited. They're going to introduce themselves in just a moment here. They're coming from CU Denver and have done some amazing work around social media and how it relates to social emotional learning. As we all discussed, or those of you that were here for part 1, we touched base on some really critical topics, especially around social media being just so present today in our lives. So just as a quick recap of what we did go over in part 1, we took a survey on our own perception of social media. So we talked a little bit about how often we use social media ourselves, and then compared that to, we brought up some research from Pew Research Center, and they had surveyed American adults on social media usage in 2020. 72% of the public uses some type of social media. 64% say social media has a negative effect. So another question we had asked in our poll was, do you think social media has a positive or negative effect, or neither? So as you can see, majority of the American adults who completed this survey are feeling like, I use some kind of social media, it's part of my life, right? And it also has a negative effect. So I'm really excited to learn a little bit more today about what kinds of effects social media might have on teenagers. So after that, we explored strategies for healthy social media use. So what kinds of things do we try and promote within our own lives and the way that we interact with social media? Made some commitments for the way that we want to use and interact with social media moving forward. And then, as Kevin actually mentioned this, we did a little jam board. So everyone got into a jam board and we discussed the current reality of social media in our classrooms and some of the different challenges that we're facing. And then, of course, shared some resources to get started. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to our speakers for this afternoon so they can introduce themselves, and really excited to dive deeper into this topic and learn everything that we can when it comes to this specific topic in the education space. So I'll go ahead and pass it over.
Ellen, thank you so much for inviting us to come and talk to this group. And I want to welcome Tiffany, because Tiffany just came up on board. Tiffany, feel free to put in the chat box where you're from and your position as we go through. So my name is Karan Westland. I am an associate professor at the University of Colorado, Denver, in the field of special education. I call myself the teacher of teachers. I train in the area of special education as well as general education. And I've been at CU Denver for the past, it sounds like a really long time, past 20 years. And I have the wonderful opportunity of being in a professional development school where I oversee a cohort of student teachers, anywhere from 7 to 10 teachers any given semester. So I get a chance to have my fingers in the pulse of what's going on in a middle school specifically right now. And thanks, Tiffany. And I had the opportunity to have Ariana in my class, and we started talking about social media and social emotional learning. Both of us really find that it's our jam, and so we went ahead and put together a presentation based on a presentation that Ariana and some of her colleagues have put together in a class. So I'm going to pass it to her for a little introduction, and then we'll get going.
All right, thank you, Karan, and thank you, Ellen, for organizing this and a little introduction beforehand. So hi, everybody. My name is Ariana Shami. I recently earned my master's degree in special education and human development from the University of Colorado, Denver. I've also earned a bachelor's degree in family studies and human development from the University of Arizona. So if anybody is originally from Arizona, you're my people. I get it. Dr. Westland was my professor throughout the entirety of my graduate program. In addition, I've also had the of working with her as her TA for 3 semesters, and working alongside her in developing and delivering presentations based off research that we've analyzed. And that presentation is what you'll be receiving today. We also presented it at the Courage to Risk conference last January, which was amazing. And that's how we actually got to come and join you all here today. Last year, I was an SEL teacher. As Karan said, I am also very passionate about SEL, and so is she. So we've taken the time to really dive into it and see why SEL is so important, considering social media is on the rise, and our kids are a big fan of it. So I was also a student council advisor at a high school in Colorado Springs. This year I transitioned out of the classroom and now work for Denver Public School it's a really long title. You ready for it? Special Education Instructional Specialist, specializing in Section 504s. So a lot of specialty inside of that. And so, yeah, I just want to thank you all for attending part 2. And I know we're both very excited to speak with you all today.
So as we get going, we want to let you know that we are very well versed in the Zoom world. So feel free to pop comments in the chat box. If you have any questions along the way, we are fine with having those interjections. Feel free to raise your hand, and we'll go ahead and call on you as the presentation goes through. There'll be a variety of opportunities for you to work in small groups to have conversations, as well as in our larger small group. So where we're headed today, and you've seen this because this is why you signed up. We firmly believe that you can embrace screen time by integrating social media and social emotional learning by really understanding it. And so you got a chance to do that a little bit in part 1. We are firm believers that clickbait is real. By merging the knowledge of SEL and the lure of social media, we think it's important to teach students to be strategic social media consumers rather than pawns in a game of algorithms. And we're going to talk about some of those algorithms today. Hopefully, at the end of this is our intent, you'll be able to understand the neuroscience behind social media. You'll learn some strategies to implement SEL as it relates to social media. And then we'll create some opportunities to discuss social media in their classroom based on some issues that we raise. And so whether it's in the classroom, because we see that you're coming from a wide assortment of areas, which was really helpful to see. And whatever areas that you have the opportunity to talk about the mix between social media and SEL, that we're just going to raise conversation points so we can look at the negative aspects, the positive aspects of social media, and kind of what are the next steps as we integrate SEL strategies.
All right, so one of my favorite parts of this presentation, as most of us have a handheld device in our pockets or right next to us on our desk, as I do right here, we relish in the convenience of instant communication. So I want to invite you all to social distance yourself from your phones for the duration of this presentation. And for those who are willing to truly challenge yourself, I want to encourage you all to place your phone even further, such as possibly a different room than you are currently located in. So we're going to take a minute to go ahead and put our phones about at least 6 feet away from us, or in a different room. And then once you have distanced yourself from your phone, we would love for you to type in the chat which challenge you chose today.
And if you are a person like Kevin who is on your handheld device, please keep it in your hands. But go ahead and challenge yourself. This is where we differentiate. Challenge yourself that you will go ahead and ignore text, games, or Amazon shopping, whatever you prefer to do. Kevin, that is good to know.
All right, I'm also going to get up real quick and move my phone away from me. Same room, but on the other side of the room. Thank you, Ellen. All right, keep popping that into the chat. 6 feet away. Nice, thanks, CJ. And then we're gonna go ahead and continue to move forward.
So keep on popping it in the chat box so we know where you're putting your phones. We'll hold you accountable. So in terms of neuroscience behind social media and technology, I like it, strong will. We'll see how that one works for you. We want to, pose this question in terms of, should you say yes to all technology, and all is relative, or just approach it differently? Like, we heard that, maybe just having a strong will, turn off the ringer, flip it over, whatever it might be. We want to see social media, as we embrace the idea behind it, is that it becomes a dilemma, as well as social media and technology becomes this tightrope in terms of, do you engage, do you not engage? Can it be all or nothing? And so we recognize, especially with the teens, how it is this huge tightrope, because we know how important it is, developmentally speaking, for kids to connect. Not that it's not important for all of us to connect, but we have as adults, we have our prefrontal cortex fully developed and our adolescents not fully developed. So they can't make the same decisions that we can in terms of when we want to turn it on, when we want to turn it off. And so we pose some of these questions, and especially if you're working with parents in the community, should you advise parents about the amount of screen time? Typically we start seeing the CDC will come up, Pediatric Association will come up and say, well, we recommend X amount of screen time. And we'll recommend, not before the age of 2 when we start looking at the blue lights, and we recommend having special glasses. So there's lots of different recommendations in place. And so we want to just start raising some of these issues as we go deeper diving into some of the research behind it, and what are going to be some of the issues that you're going to bring up with the people that you're working with.
All right, so throughout the presentation, we will discuss various topics of social media, such as addiction, sexting, body image, mental health effects. And as we understand that the following topics can be rather difficult to discuss, we do feel it's important to inform you all of possible trigger warnings before proceeding forward. However, we will analyze the prevalence of social media has on our society and focus on how our students are currently being affected by social media platforms.
So this is the piece in terms of where we start highlighting things such as the social dilemma. Social dilemma is a film that talks about social media and how it impacts individuals. It talks about how social media is highly addictive, which is one of the reasons that we had you distance yourself a little bit from your device. And it's addictive through intermittent reinforcement. And what we know about intermittent reinforcement, it's like gambling. Back in the day when you used to put quarters in machines or pennies or whatever you might in a slot machine. And after every so many pennies in, pulling the handle, then, some change would come out, or a lot of change, depending if you're lucky. And it's one of the most powerful sources of reinforcement, because every now and then you win and every now and then you'll lose. And so with social media, as you're hopping onto it, sometimes you're winning and you're getting really positively reinforced. And then sometimes you're getting some of those negative messages, and kids are getting those negative messages, and they're trying to figure out which one makes sense and which one doesn't. Social media definitely seduces and manipulates not only ourselves as adults, but kids specifically. And they don't have the critical thinking skills to understand how they are getting seduced. And with things such as TikTok, Snapchat, and we'll talk about a variety of these platforms of social media, Instagram, it seduces and it tells you how you should be and how you should act. And what happens is through social media, through our phones and other devices, algorithms are built. And Social Dilemma actually talks about those algorithms. It knows everything. Every time you click, it creates an algorithm, a code that says, hey, you're interested in Dr. Pepper. Ariana and I were having this conversation the other night, whether or not the phones can really hear us and whether or not we'll start seeing ads that come up. And so I kept on talking into my device saying soccer balls and just seeing if soccer balls would come up on a regular basis. I was in the schools today, so I haven't been able to scroll social media to know whether or not it came up. Ariana, did any Dr. Pepper ads come up for you?
You know, not today, not today. I will say I have a friend that's pregnant, and I've talked about pregnancy a couple times with my husband, not to have babies, but just talking about little ones being cute. Next thing you know, I have all of these ads that are all about pregnancy on Facebook, on Instagram, on Snapchat even, and it's really throwing me off, guys.
And so kids, what's happening for them is they're clicking on things. They might click on a TikTok link. And they're looking through their reels, and the computer, the system is going ahead and memorizing and creating code for what they find reinforcing. And in fact, what we've known in terms of shows on places like Netflix, which is obviously not social media, but what they do is they actually create an algorithm of shows that you might like, and they start building those shows based on how quickly you watch the shows. If you keep on hitting next on the series that have multiple episodes. Christine, you had a question.
Okay, sorry, I had to find the unmute button. So you know how when you are thinking about buying a car and you get the Ford Escape, and then all of a sudden you start seeing Ford Escapes everywhere when you never saw them before. Is there any kind of an element that could be true? Like, for example, her statement about the pregnancy, like we had just talked about pregnancy and all of a sudden all these, is it that our mind just now, because we had this conversation, just kind of now all of a sudden I'm seeing it all the time? It was always there, but I didn't notice it before. How does that play a role, I guess is what how is that comparatively, or how does that correlate?
I love that. And for example, people say when someone dies, that they maybe see like a dragonfly or a ladybug or something like that. And then all of a sudden they start saying that. So the unconscious will actually go ahead and put that message in our mind so that we become ultra aware anytime we're hyper aware of our environment. However, as well as the person who just talked about the roof, what ends up happening on our devices is if we click once and we stay on a site, whatever site it might be, for an X period of time, then those ads will start coming up, and they'll come up in to a point where they're trying to get you to click again and again. If you do not click on those ads, they will eventually go away, but it takes some time. So there's an algorithm in terms of, for example, how many people are, how long do you take to buy a car? So for that period of time that typical people will take to buy a car, they'll have it up for that period of time. And then those ads will slowly disappear because maybe you're not clicking on it anymore. You've already purchased your car. They have a sense that you're not buying any of those pieces. The same way with the rooftops, I love the idea that all of a sudden you start seeing roofing ads. You never looked up roofing information. I'm curious if you actually called somebody that had the title roof in their name, or it could have been in your area that there was a recent hailstorm. And so then they go ahead and they target, they know our phone numbers, they know our area codes, they know our weather. and whether or not your phone is really connected to where you're living, because we know that we're a very transient population, but then they'll go ahead and populate those ads. We reinforce those ads being played over and over again anytime we spend time on the ad or we click on an ad or something related. Ariana, I'm letting you move forward or say something.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move forward. But that is true. I mean, I remember when I'll add one little thing. When I was planning my wedding, next thing you know, I got a venue, and then all of these venue ads started coming in, venues that I've never even heard of before. That's actually how I found my venue. And then every like photographer, all the floral, next thing you know, every single ad that I had was just wedding. So I'm still recovering from that and just like not engaging anymore. All right, so social media addiction. Research on social media addiction reveals that approximately 210 million people worldwide suffer from some sort of internet and social media addiction, with a projection that this behavior addiction will continue to rise. Social media addiction is when an individual is overly concerned about social media. They have an uncontrollable urge to log on or use a particular platform, which ultimately results in devoting a significant amount of time and effort that it diminishes essential areas of life. Another study found that social networking usage was related to internal problems, as well as a decrease in academic performance when utilizing this platform for 2 or more hours a day. So I'm going to restate that part real quick. Decrease is in academic performance when utilizing these platforms for 2 or more hours a day.
So right away, I should be thinking, so what's that impact on our kids if they're on their devices? That was a rhetorical question. You can go ahead and like think your own. Ellen went ahead and responded. It's like, yikes, no.
Yikes. So as Karan talked about earlier in our overview was Clickbait. Clickbait is actually a Karan series on Netflix.
Series. It's not a movie. So this is just kind of funny. I told Ariana, I said, you know, I watched this, you got to see it based on the presentation that you made. You got to see Clickbait. And I said, it was a movie. Well, it's a series. And so I'm like, a movie series, it doesn't really matter. It really kind of pulls you right in. Apparently in her life, it is an insane series. Yes.
It is an insane series.
Ariana, tell us why it being a series versus a movie is so important in yours and Sam's life.
It's not about the language. Just going to throw that out there of it being a movie or a series. It's about the time commitment you put into it. So as everybody was saying that it's an insane series, it really is. So you're addicted to like wanting to continue to watch it. Of course, my husband and I finished it in 2 days, but which is not good. That's 8 hours that we just spent watching it. But that's the difference between a series, 8 hours, movie, 2 hours. But to bring it all back, Clickbait, the series has a way of capturing our attention, and it leaves us always wanting more, as I was just explaining right now. The series has a really powerful, like a tangible lens on the power of social media. And through the power of social media, one photo or video can go viral very, very, very quickly. So for those who have seen the series, they put I don't want to ruin it, but it is inside of like the trailer scene where you can see that the individual was kidnapped, and there was a video that had a sign, and it said if they don't get, or if it hits 5 million views, they were going to kill the person. Next thing you know, it's going viral. Everybody's watching it because they're like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Like, is this real? Is this fake? So as humans, we tend to tone into what this is, or into what is currently going viral. We really like to have the sensationalized headlines that pique our curiosity. And so of course, we tend to click on it. So it brings awareness to the power of social media. I want to say that one more time. So if you haven't watched Clickbait, please go watch it. Every photo that is posted on social media, even the ones that are deleted off of our Facebook or Instagram, will forever be accessible through the internet. It provides opportunities for others to utilize our own photos as they please. We as humans, we have a need to be loved and wanted by other humans. It's part of our biological processes that is both dynamic and bi-directional in several dimensions. Our body actually seeks love and responds constantly to interactions with loved ones or the absence of such interaction. Social media has the power to connect us to individuals across the world. So if you have family all the way in Florida, you can still connect with them and you're in Colorado. You can see what they're doing through their status updates, the photos that they want to post. And so people who will use these platforms as an outlet, a way to seek love, to seek acceptance by their peers. They can also use these platforms to create a false identity by pretending to be someone on social media that they are not, their own ideal perfect version of who they wish to be, which is called catfishing, if anyone has also seen that on MTV. Plus, you also never know, you can be catfished by someone that you actually personally know. So I had a student once tell me that one of their friends' mothers took their photos from social media and was pretending to be them. This can happen to you, it can happen to a friend, it can happen to a family member and our students.
And what's tough is that, you know, as the teens are like, they take it as face value. They figure if someone's snapping them, even if they don't know them, that they're okay, that they're another, I have a 13-year-old and it's like, oh, it's just another 13-year-old. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be creepy for a moment. And I go, because they can conceal their identity, this person could actually be a 35-year-old guy. And she's like, what would a 35-year-old want with a 13-year-old? And I'm like, that's when we're going to have these conversations. And so we started having those conversations, not fun conversations to be having as a parent, but nevertheless, what we need to know both as parents, as educators, as community members, that this happens and that we need to protect our kids, to be critical thinkers and to let them know what is possible with social media, not to scare them, but to make them aware. Go ahead. Next slide.
All right, so this pie chart shown on the screen illustrates what happens on social media in just 60 seconds. So when I was a high school teacher, I constantly witnessed my students using Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok, YouTube as well as their source of entertainment and a way to communicate with their friends. So I had a lot of students that would tell me that, Miss, like I need to use my phone real quick. And I'm like, you're on Snapchat, like get off of there. Like, that's how I'm talking to my mom. And I'm like, what? And then they would show me, and that's actually how they would communicate with their family members. So in just 60 seconds, I'm going to point out just a couple of these ones. 3.4 million snaps are created on Snapchat. 695,000 stories are shared on Instagram. 5,000 TikToks are downloaded. And 28,000 subscribers are watching Netflix. And 500 hours of content is uploaded to YouTube. Again, that is in 1 minute. So think about how much content is constantly being uploaded to YouTube, how many Snapchats are going around, how many Instagram stories are being posted. And it's all happening simultaneously. So when showing them that pie chart, my students, it was incredible, but it took me back for a second to see the disbelief in their eyes. Phones were not touched, which was awesome. Students started to just stare at the slide. And like, I just saw their jaws drop. And so we began a class discussion regarding our personal usage of these platforms. I remember students staying after class as they wanted to share their personal stories on how social media has negatively impacted them as well. Some students even asked if I could show them how to delete their account or how to make their account private. So with all that being said, I wanted to invite you all to open this conversation up for a discussion with within your classroom as well. As it was extremely powerful to see this information resonate with my kiddos and how they wanted to take further steps to protect themselves on social media. All right, so are we truly addicted to social media? We're gonna watch this little video on how social media affects our brains. I don't think I shared my audio. Let's see if I can fix that real quick. Perfect. Okay. Can you hear it?
Tell you in a minute. Cannot hear it.
Okay. Thanks for my AirPods. Thank you for working with me on my technical difficulties.
We like, we follow, we unfollow, we subscribe. But how is social media affecting us? A small study of 20 college students found a correlation between students who demonstrated higher levels of Facebook addiction and activity in the amygdala striatal system while they interacted with Facebook symbols. This activation was the same seen in those with substance addiction. In a 2016 UCLA study, teens were split into two groups. One was shown a photo with a high number of likes, and the other group was shown the same photo, but with fewer likes. Those who viewed the photo with more likes were more likely to like the photo themselves than the group who saw the photo with fewer likes. Again, it was the same picture. This experiment found activity in multiple parts of the brain when teens saw photos they took receive a lot of likes. In particular, the study found significant activity in part of the brain's reward circuitry known as the nucleus accumbens. Dopamine is released in the brain after positive social stimuli, such as likes and positive comments on social media. That photo she just posted, she got a bunch of likes, releasing dopamine into her brain and causing a feeling of satisfaction. Psychologist B.F. Skinner found that mice would respond to certain stimuli they knew resulted in a reward more often when the reward came at variable times. This theory can also be applied to social media and the times we check it looking for a reward in terms of a like, comment, or message. We habitually check our accounts, but we are not always rewarded. Maybe this photo didn't get the amount of likes you wanted, so you'll try again and again and again, looking for that reward. But wait, something else. Have you ever felt your phone vibrate when it really didn't? According to Robert Rosenberger of the Georgia Institute of Technology, we've become so connected to our phones that they've sort of become part of our bodies. Anytime something stimulates or triggers sensation in an area where you keep your phone, you might believe it's your phone. This is called phantom vibration syndrome. Studies show that nearly 90% of people report experiencing these phantom vibrations.
All right. So I just want us to sit on that for a second. It's a social validation. Exactly what kind of thing a hacker like myself would come up with, because we're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. Sean Parker, former Facebook president. Karan, would you like to add anything regarding the video?
I think that when we say things are not impacting us, like likes or hearts or whatever it might be, that we get to the subconscious piece, that consciously they may not be impacting us, but they really are. We just don't realize it hasn't brought to our conscious level. And once again, you go back to teens that are using social media, they everything is at a subconscious level. They think that they know everything. That's part of who they are developmentally speaking. And so they wouldn't think it's anything different. And so they're doing what they do to get that validation. And so when we look at things like Maslow's hierarchy, and we look at the importance, the very basics of human needs, after food, water, shelter, we're looking at safety and belonging, that we want to have a sense of belonging. And so this all makes sense that it feeds into the human psyche.
So while we go on to the next slide, if you can type in the chat, if you've ever experienced where you feel that vibration on like in your pocket or your front pocket, your back pocket, on your Apple Watch. If you ever feel that vibration where you're like, oh my gosh, yes, like I need to check, and then there's nothing there. I will confidently tell you all that that happens to me quite often. All right, so the neuroscience indicators of social media addiction. Students who spend, so here are the signs and symptoms, part one. There's a couple of slides for this. Students who spend more time on social media are more likely to demonstrate poor academic performance. So when talking to my students about this, I was told, and I quote, "I learn more on TikTok than I do in school. They need to make a TikTok university where we can just watch TikTok all day. I would get all A's, Miss Shammy." And I was like, okay. Tell me what you learned. I learned to eat a watermelon with mustard and it's gross. Yeah. So another one would be constantly comparing yourself to others, the ideal picture perfect person we see online. I want to look like her and I want to have her things, the things that she has. I want the career that she has. I also talk to my students about this unrealistic lens and standards that are being demonstrated through social media and how comparing ourselves to others can create many insecurities and may cause us to become extremely unhappy with ourselves. Being friends with people on social media that we do not really know. If you are open to writing this in the chat, I encourage you to do so. You do not have to, but if you have friends that you on social media that you're like, I haven't talked to you in 10 years. I have no idea what you look like in person anymore. But you still follow them or are still friends with them. Type that in the chat. Participating in activities just to post on social media. In my undergrad, I studied abroad in Italy and traveled to Paris for a weekend trip. The individual I traveled with was like, yeah, let's go to the Louvre. And I was super excited about it. And we got in an Uber and we went to the Louvre. But not to go inside the museum. Instead, we traveled all that way just for her to take the Instagram picture of pinching the pyramids outside of the Louvre. Oh, I didn't even switch the slide, I'm sorry. What? Okay, let's go back to that. There we go. And another sign and symptom would be the feelings of guilt, anxiety, depression, isolation, and low self-esteem, the lack of physical activity, being anxious and feeling shame for not getting enough likes on a photo, missing out on valuable sleep as we engage in the addictive scroll.
And so when we see all this, you think about if you are on social media and then you're doing that social comparison with others, especially during COVID time, when all of a sudden you're like, they're getting out, I'm not getting out. Should I be getting out? And you start questioning yourself. And then when people were starting to get out, you're like, they're traveling here, I'm not traveling there. And it's perchance in terms of who's posting and what they're posting. And because I have a 13-year-old, I have taken the first day of school pic, which I think is incredibly funny. And so she's like, if you take a picture every first day all the way through school, you could actually watch me grow up all the way through school. And I thought that was really kind of funny because she had no idea that that's kind of a trend on Facebook in terms of posting the first day of school pics. And so what we're seeing as adults is far different than what the kids are saying. And it's influencing them all in different ways, but it's influencing them. So one of the things that we see in terms of that influence is this house of mirrors where there's a social distortion. It's distortion of your body image, of what you like, what you don't like, what you do. The web has truly become a hall of mirrors filled only with a reflection of our data. And so whatever gets back to the algorithms, but whatever we put out there and whatever we click on, we start seeing everything that is related to what we are interested in, whether it's what we're interested in purchasing, what we're interested in doing. If you're interested in, I think I clicked one time on like a tiny home / van RV kind of thing. I'd seen it and I'm like, oh, I want to see what that looks like. And then everything you knew, was a reflection of that simple click that was just a random click. And so we need to be aware of that it reinforces us, and telling our kids how it's reinforcing them. The Social Dilemma is a great film in terms of helping teens, one kid, learn about how she feels not having her phone nearby and how it was really telling her how to think and act and behave. And so in addition, I talked about the 35-year-old that's posing and catfishing. Sexting is real. This is I'm just looking for a yikes out of Ellen again. I mean, when you look at the statistics, how adolescents begin sexting at the age of 13, it's a small percentage because they're just curious. They want to know how it works. But as they get older, we see more kids sexting. The sexting is the sexually explicit materials that's sent through your devices, and kids thinking, oh, I'm just trying this. And there's been multiple news reports where kids, especially in just when they're going to college, at that college age, where they sext a picture and then someone gets a hold of it and starts blackmailing them, and it ends up ending their life or ruining their life, whether ruining their life overall or they end up committing or contemplating suicide. And so they don't know how to stop it, because when someone says, I'm going to put your body part all over the internet, they know it's possible because things go viral all over the place. So we're getting a solid percentage of kids that are engaging in this. It becomes high risk behavior, and then it ends up becoming a piece that impacts their mental health. So as I talk about the small group of kids that start it, first we see them doing it as a joke. They just think it's funny and they give it a try. About a third of them feel it's sexy because they're trying to act adult-like. But for the most part, this is where most of the kids start off. About 12% feel pressured, and that's how they start getting into the sexting. And then it kind of builds from there. You're on mute, Ariana.
I got the notification right away. Thank you. So do you check any social media platforms or play games on your phone before going to bed? We are going to ask you all that. If so, name that social media platform. Go ahead and type that into the chat. And the game, social media platform, or the game that you play. From there, we want you to estimate how much time that you spend doing that before bed every night. Then we want you to multiply that number by 7. Then multiply your new number by 4. Once you have all that, go ahead and type that number into the chat with your final calculation. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Pauline. Cool, love that. Pauline, if you have any podcasts that you recommend to me, please send them my way. Backstory while we're doing the calculation, Pauline, I travel from the Springs all the way to Denver every day for work. So podcasts have become my best friend to keep me company. So if you have any, let me know. Okay, a lot of you are getting 28.
Which means that they took 1 times 7 times 4.
And then I have one that was 56. Thank you, Dee, for that as well. Okay, so that number that you just calculated is how many hours you spend on your phone before bed in just 1 month. So ironically enough, I also spend 28 hours doing that between Instagram and between my water sorting puzzle game or playing pool with Karan. So 28 hours. That's 28 hours of extra sleep I could have gotten in a month, or that all of you could have gotten, or the person who got 56. That is 56 hours that you could have gotten before going to bed. I'm sorry, that is 56 more hours of sleep you could have gotten in 1 month if we were not on our phones. So for me personally, with the 28, and a lot of people who are also receiving the 28 hours, that is over 1 day of extra sleep we could have gotten. Think about how much more like present we could be, more awake and just feeling refreshed if we were to get that 28 hours of sleep. So social media can affect our mental health in many ways. The example right here is poor sleep quality. And it also can increase anxiety and increase depression in general. And then Karan, do you want to touch on the little icon?
Yeah, so Mintrol right here, this icon that I'm pointing to that you can't see that I'm pointing to, but the little moon icon is an app, and it's a sleep tracking app. And so if you don't think you're doing anything before bed, pop this app in your phone. You turn it on right before bed, and then it tracks how long it takes you to fall asleep. It tracks. Christine, have you used this before? I'm seeing the nodding of the head here. Mass or minus, maybe a little bit. And so it tracks your snoring. It tracks environmental sounds and whatnot. And there's many different apps that are out there. And it'll tell you whether or not you had fair sleep, poor sleep, whatnot. I'm not saying that this is the best app out there. It's free. It's just a good gauge. I'll go ahead and pop it into the chat. It's Mintrol, Mintral. And then, yeah, if any of you others use another one, pop it in the app. I mean, I'm all about promoting a little technology while we're here. Shut Eye is pretty cool. Now I got a new one that I'm writing down that I gotta check out. But it's the whole idea of just being aware of how the media is impacting you, whether or not you fall asleep right away or not. I know that, I might do a little scrolling. What we know about sleep hygiene is that you should actually put your device away. You should not have TV in your room, and you should be able to have the low light anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours before going to bed in order to have a solid night's sleep. As adults, we should be targeting between 6 to 8 hours of sleep every night. There's something called oversleeping. You don't want to get too much sleep. You'll know your sweet spot because you'll just wake up naturally. You should, for sleep hygiene, you actually should go to bed at the same time every night, even on the weekends or on vacation, whatever it might be, and wake up at the same time every morning. And in addition to sleep hygiene, I know, Ariana, I'm blowing your mind here, right? And then in addition to that, you actually should do something like make your bed every morning. It's a productivity piece. Some of you were taught that growing up, but into bed, same time every night, get up same time every morning, make your bed, just having those routines and habits, which is just aligned with social media, because the social media is teaching us those habits of I should scroll before going to bed, or I should scroll, the famous one here, I gotta go to the bathroom, and then don't go beyond this. But then people are taking their phones into the bathroom, and I'm like, and they're spending way too long in the bathroom. And I think that there was a video about that. And that's why phones fall in the toilet. Yes, be disciplined an hour before bed. That's a game changer. Thanks, Tiffany, for sharing that. So some people are going to walk away with that and say, if it was a game changer for Tiffany, maybe I'll challenge myself and give it a try. Go ahead and go to the next slide there.
So what do we think about some breakout rooms?
I got them all set.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and put you guys in some breakout rooms. We want you to pick one of the 4 prompts to discuss with your breakout group. Corona, how long do we want to give them?
Let's go ahead and give them 5 minutes. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. And everyone's back. Yeah, Alberta, just hang tight, and we know that it's causing connectivity issues. We also know that you can hear us there, so that's good. So what we wanted to do is just to give you an opportunity to reflect on it a little bit. We'll have an opportunity to talk in large group another time in this presentation, but we just wanted to start getting you to think about it and having some of those connecting pieces. If there's any big ahas, if you go ahead and pop it out in the chat in terms of things that just kind of stuck with you, or if any questions that you have so far, we'll give you a chance to pop those in as we go to the next slide. Go ahead, Ariana.
All right, so negative effects of social media use. And social media can negatively impact us in numerous ways, such as less sleep, insecurities, body shaming, resulting in lower self-esteem, feelings of loneliness. It can lower overall life satisfaction, cause depression and anxiety, and it can even cause suicidal thoughts. So a little fact to include into this part, especially that last little bullet point. Teens who spend 5 or more hours per day on devices are 71% more likely to experience higher rates of depression, with a risk factor for suicide, regardless of the content that they are consuming. So teens who spend 5 or more hours per day on their devices are 71% more likely to experience higher rates of depression.
And if you think about it, you know, if regardless of what the rule is at school, when they get home from school, that gives them a clear 5 hours to be on a device if they are not being monitored in a different kind of way. So what we know in terms of suicide being on the rise is that there is a correlation. I do a lot of research in the area of suicide and social media, looking at the connection, the interaction of it, and whether it's causational or not, because it's really hard to say, hey, this caused me to kill myself. Obviously, there's multiple factors in when someone is suicidal. Yeah, so Pauline, yeah, it's when there's more than one suicide at a high school, it ends up becoming an epidemic. We've had some places in Denver metro area where there's been 4 or more suicides in 1 year. And as a result, something called Second Wind Foundation was created as a way to respond to that and actually put some preventative care in place to stop that. We have mental health professionals that in towns, whether in urban or rural areas, if some student has committed suicide, that the mental health professionals will actually sit in that kiddo's seat for the whole week. I know it gives you goosebumps right now, but for that whole week, so that other kids are not looking at it as an option and seeing the empty seat, but seeing a counselor as a way to reach out and talk with someone. I lived in a rural area. This is different than living in Herkimer or Ithaca or Groton. But I lived in rural South Dakota, and we started having an epidemic of suicides at the local high school. There's one high school in the town. And so really wanted to put into place, you know, how do we go ahead and prevent that and stop that? Because once it starts becoming an option, kids see it as an option. As the popularity of social media has increased, so has anxiety and depression. I know this doesn't surprise you, but it's mind-boggling that we have these rates, and it has just followed the trajectory upward. And this has happened since 2012, when some of the social media platforms have just like upped in their popularity. These factors can be correlated. We also see hospital admissions for non-fatal self-harm. So this is when kids are, especially girls, are cutting themselves. That this has increased by 189%. No, I did not put a typo in there. 189%, mind-boggling. 15 to 19-year-olds has increased by 62% since 2009, and that's when we start seeing the introduction of platforms such as Facebook coming in. So MySpace taking a backspace back in the day, and then it starts going upward. Suicide rates are up 70% in teenagers and increased 151% in preteens. I did not do a typo there, 151% in preteens. So gone are the days where, you know, it's up a little bit. I mean, we're talking that this is definitely heartbreaking, Pauline. I totally agree, and that this is an epidemic. Ariana, go to the next slide there. And so as you hear me talk about this so passionately, I'm committed to youth, and I'm committed to mental health, and I'm committed to talking freely about suicide, because I firmly believe that we have to slash the stigma of mental health, that we need to talk about it openly. We need to have that conversation. Kids consider suicide thoughts go in their head, and when it becomes plausible to them, and they're saying things on social media that makes it even more plausible, then we definitely have the epidemic. What we know is that in Colorado specific, I know that we have people from all over the place, but in Colorado specifically, we're seeing pediatric emergency departments that are overrun with kids attempting suicide and suffering from other forms of major mental health illness. I had a friend who brought her son at the age of 11 that was having a suicidal breakdown. She brought him to the hospital. They said, yeah, we'd admit him, but we don't have any room. We have no beds. And so they're like, you can go ahead and drive another hour and a half to go find a bed. And it's like, what's the guarantee that there's going to be a bed? And so as you see this, and I know that you saw part of this in part one last time, but you just see this rise going on upward that's truly out of control. So it is a mental health and a pediatric emergency. And so one of the things that we do in terms of anxiety, and we see the rising rate of anxiety, we see it even more with that of COVID, that how the anxiety has increased with our kids. We, Mark Brackett, who's a guru in the area of social emotional learning, he highlighted that anxiety disorders are more common in mental illness in the USA, affecting 25% of our kids, 13 to 18. And so one simple thing I always like to, leave people some strategies here as we get towards the end of our presentation, is to think about things as simple as teaching mindfulness. In our school, we do mindfulness minutes where they get a chance to do some deep breathing, some meditation. This is something where, when a kid's like, no, I have a kid who's like, no, I'm not going to deep breathe. No, I'm not going to visualize anything. Like, hey, that's okay. I'm like, let's put the hand out. Name 5 things that you see around you. And what it does is it just centers and grounds you. And so as you think about the 5 things, just looking your surrounding, I'm seeing a glass, I'm seeing some pens. I'm just putting my hands down here. I'm seeing a notebook. I'm seeing some sheet music. I am seeing a perfection game. Go figure, I have games right here. And then go to 4 things that you can touch. I can touch the table. I can touch this placemat. I can touch my shirt. I can go ahead and touch my hair. I'm calming down. 3 things that I can hear. I can hear the fridge. I can hear some birds in the outside. I can go ahead and hear the hum of my computer. That's ADHD for you. 2 things that you can smell. Typically people like, I can smell the coffee somewhere, especially in the morning. So I can smell the coffee. I can go ahead and smell when someone's just shampooed their hair. And then one thing they can taste, that's where the coffee breath comes in. You can taste the coffee breath, and just to like take yourself down. And so what you've done is you've actually counted down. You've counted down more than 10, but then you've grounded yourself. And so the people that you work with, if you can teach this technique, it's a very simple mindfulness technique. You can mix it around in terms of 5 things that you can hear. Usually if you just do 3 things, that's probably way more than you need. Ariana, go ahead and advance the slide for me. And so we went back and forth in terms of whether or not we wanted to highlight this in terms of stop scrolling, ask yourself, because if we know ourselves first, then we can help the other people that we interact with. So to ask yourself, am I seeing posts, if I'm doing social media or whatever you're seeing on your phone, that make you unhappy? Are the podcasts making you unhappy? Or are they making you happy? Do I follow accounts that make me feel like I need to be someone I'm just not? Especially some people might be following stories about, celebrities or something like that. Am I following that? Do I need to? Am I comparing my life and body success with others? Is the way I use social media affecting my mental health negatively? And so if you can answer any of this where you're like, yeah, well, maybe you need to take a change, challenge yourself to be away from your phone, turn it off, try and Google while it is turned off. That's just kind of humorous. So enjoy that moment, but also be mindful of it. So to know self first, then we can help others. So going to the next slide. So ultimately, this next piece is, talking about emotional literacy. This is connected with that of social emotional learning. It's all about having that conversation. Just like I said, slashing stigmas and talking about mental health, it's slashing stigmas. Oh my goodness, my Google Home just responded to my statement, turning all things off, the power I have. That emotional literacy can be connected with that social media presence, help students and the communities that you're working with foster awareness, self and social, around social media, pros and cons. We have to be critical thinkers in terms of how we consume media, just like we're critical thinkers in terms of consuming food, consuming processed food, not processed food, whatever it might be. But we need to be critical thinkers in those situations. We do see death and destruction. We become numb to that. When we see that death and destruction, we become we almost feel like it can't happen to us in some respects. But we need to engage in those ongoing conversations about mental health, social media, and really manage self. Encourage students to set their own boundaries and make decisions. Not that the adults, but that we give kids the control and say, so how long do you think you should be on social media? When do you think you should turn it off? When should you put it at its charging station? When should you wake up? How much is too much? And then engage students by getting them involved in activities that reduce screen time and social media. It's really hard to play basketball and be on your phone at the same time. So to think about those activities. I like, Christine, thank you for the smile there. However, some people make unsafe choices in my neighborhood and they ride a bike while texting. And so my daughter and I are like, that's not a good choice. I'm like, that really doesn't feel like a good choice. We always get around away from the people that look like they're texting and driving. Like, I think they're texting. She goes, speed up, let's go see. I go, well, let's not speed up, but we'll go ahead and see if they're texting and driving. Go ahead and flip us to the next one. And so overall, the social learning, social emotional learning is about this process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand emotions. So to hear how emotional literacy comes in play, understand their emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. CASEL is a center for social emotional learning, and it's all about, how do we connect with others? So if you're not familiar with CASEL, Google it when your phone is near and dear to you. Christine says, yep, I know all about CASEL. And some of you, just because you're here and you are learning about social emotional learning, you're like, I'm very familiar with them. Give me a thumbs up in your screen as we go to the next slide if you are familiar with CASEL, Mark Brackett, any of those kinds of social emotional learning in general. Just like looking for some of those screens, the thumbs up. Ariana, go ahead and flip us to the next one. I just wanted to get a sense of who might know a little bit there. Don't worry, she's trying to go to the next one.
It is on mine.
There we go. So if you know about social emotional learning, you know the importance of recognizing emotions. CASEL and SEL, awesome. Thank you, Jocelyn. It's about recognizing your emotions, truly understanding them, labeling them. You got to label them, express them, and then finally getting at the regulation of emotions. Mark Brackett is the director of the CASEL Center, and really highlights, how do we get a grasp around our emotions. Go ahead and forward another one. I like how she's looking up as she's trying to forward.
It's my dual screen, but it's showing on mine that it is up.
Yeah, go ahead and put it to the next slide. There we go. And so what we want you to, this is just a visual. First, I just love Calvin and Hobbes. And so I mean, Calvin is just filled with so many emotions. And so to think about, when we talk about emotions and we go over, edge in terms of how you feel, is to just help individuals. If you're coaching about SEL, if you are training parents, if you're working with students directly, to really kind of recognize those emotions, including facial expressions, body language, vocal tones, other nonverbals, because what we see with our kids is that many kids that have challenges with their emotional regulation is because they don't recognize it at the very beginning. And so you've seen all those pieces, and then really looking at this SEL as a foundation. Key benefits, I'm telling you nothing that you don't know, but I want you to pair it with social media in terms of, we see all the negative aspects. We saw about how it impacts mental health, but to think about how social emotional learning can, kind of combat it in terms of providing positive academic outcomes and improved behavior, higher attendance, improved economic mobility, improves lifetime outcomes. So it makes sense to pair these together so kids can control their impulses, they can have empathy, that they can talk about the media and have a conversation so that they can communicate clearly, solve their problems, build their friendships. So they utilize media as a tool rather than something that brings them down in terms of their depression and anxiety. Go ahead, Ariana.
To confirm, can you see the colors?
Yeah, I can. I see 4 colors.
Perfect. Beautiful. Okay, so it worked. Now, I want you all to pick a color. You have 5 seconds to pick your color, but your 5 seconds is now up because I've already taken 5 seconds to state that. So everybody has color. And now what I want you all to do is, going off the color that you chose from the previous slide. Well, I'm going to go this way. There we go. I want you 1 by 2 feeling words that relate to the emotion stated on your color. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys 30 seconds to a minute to identify 2 feeling words that relate to that color.
So if I pick blue, I'm going to pick 2 feeling words that connect with sad.
Correct. And once you have that, go ahead and type that in. Actually, don't type that into the yet, but be prepared to type that into the chat.
Do you want them to type it in and then not hit return?
Correct.
So
Thank
type
you for
your 2
clarifying.
feeling words and then control yourself, impulse control. Don't hit return yet. We're all about growth mindset here.
Go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you got your 2 feeling words. Beautiful. So if you had red, will you raise your hand? Beautiful. Okay, so I see Jocelyn. Would you be willing to unmute and share your 2 feeling words?
Okay. My 2 words were embarrassed and disappointed.
Awesome. Thank you.
Will all the red ones hit return?
Yeah. Embarrassed and disappointed. Thank you, Jocelyn. To add on to Jocelyn, a couple other words could be panicked, livid, terrified, worried, annoyed. There's a bunch of feeling words for angry. If you had yellow, would you raise your hand? Or be willing to unmute and share with us?
I think I'm going to call on Aaron.
I chose enthusiastic and overjoyed.
Enthusiastic and overjoyed.
Thank you.
Nice.
If you had yellow, go ahead and hit return in the chat box.
A couple to go off of happy as well while you were working on sending those is thrilled, motivated, enthusiastic, joyful, proud, and hopeful. So we're going to change things up instead of raising your hand. If you are wearing the color blue, would you be willing to unmute and share your 2 feeling words for blue?
I'm wearing blue and I picked blue.
Ooh,
Perfect.
Oh,
Perfect. That, Ellen?
My 2 words were depressed and lonely.
Depressed and lonely. So as Corinne would say, if you pick blue, please go ahead and send that forward. A couple other ones to go off of what Ellen was saying is exhausted, disappointed, guilty, ashamed, bored, or discouraged. Okay, here's the hard one where you have to be very truthful because we cannot really see your eyes. But if you have green eyes, would you please unmute and share 2 feeling words? Oh, I heard somebody.
Sandra's going to tell us.
I don't know. I'm not sad or tired. I have green eyes, but I'm happy.
So what
So-
would be your 2 feeling words for green?
Green is calm, which is what it says already. And I don't know, I just think of nature, but it's not really a feeling word. So it'd be like calm and I don't know, relaxed.
What do you, yeah, relax. That's a great one for it. What would you feel when you're in nature? Would you feel peaceful?
Yeah, you'd be like peaceful, calm.
Definitely. So actually those are the words I have. So peaceful, safe, restful, thoughtful, relaxed, secure, serene, balanced, mellow, content, and thankful. All right, so this is actually an activity that you can do with your students as well. It helps them be able to really truly explain what this feeling is. So instead of just saying like, I'm angry, they have more words to be able to explain what angry means. Like, why are they angry? More words to be able to express than just using that word angry. I am annoyed.
You know,
Rather than just I am angry.
a thing about that is that in different cultures, it's very different. And I have a lot of different cultures in my classroom. It's like red is calm, I think, in some cultures.
Yeah. And in some cultures, red is power.
Yeah, so there's a lot more to that, I think, color thing.
Right.
But like in general, this is how our culture sees it. What we have here, but that's not always true.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think to acknowledge, how people are reading and perceiving it differently, and to
Mhm.
have those conversations, open up those conversations.
Yeah, so it's good. So it makes them think about their feelings,
Right.
regardless, which is good.
Thank you for sharing that as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go into the next slide.
So this idea is that if SEL, like if social emotional learning leads to positive academic outcomes, improved behavior, higher attendance, improved economic mobility, improves lifetime outcomes, and pairing it with if technology does this, it creates an engaged learning environment. Notice the positives. It incorporates varied learning styles. It improves collaboration. It prepares students for the future. It connects teachers with students. If all of that, then teachers should allow for opportunities to build relationships and social support, and enable time for creativity, personal expression, technology decisions. That teachers should get out there and say, hey, you've got your device, go ahead and create a playlist. You've got your device, do a Jamboard, but not for Kevin because he's not on a device. He's on a different kind of device. But it's the idea of like how we can use devices to improve our feelings rather than bring us down.
All right, so how do we do with the 6 feet social distance challenge? Good, all right. So how many of you were able to keep your phone away from you throughout this entire presentation? Maybe without even thinking about your notifications or text messages you may have received? Keep those thumbs going. If you were able to not think about it at all, let me see that. If you were like, oh,
Christine, I want to know what you were thinking. Just tell us.
I never touched my phone, never looked at it, never touched it, sitting within hand's reach and it's upside down, never even thought about it.
Nice.
Did you feel in control over that?
I just didn't think about it. It wasn't because my focus is here, right? So I was explaining I'm a very controlled person. So when my focus is here, that's it. I don't, nothing. I'm here.
Thank you for being present.
Sierra, I saw your face be like, when I asked about the notifications.
I kept thinking about what apps I would have opened.
I appreciate the honesty. And then D, I picked up mine 3 times, even though it's off. It's like an automatic reflex, right? All right. Well, thank you for engaging in that activity with us. Feel free to go ahead and grab your phones as we are wrapping up our presentation right now, or you can leave them where they're at. The choice is yours if you want to continue to distance yourself. And yes, the meme, I'm having people over to stare at their phone later if you want to come by.
And as we teach our kids how to use devices, during meal times, it's okay to have a phone out if it's flipped over. It's okay to have it if it's on silence, just like in the movie theater, just silence your phone. This is what the norm is. And so when we talk about social media and emotional literacy, so I went from the individual, no self first. Now we go to kind of like the classroom level, and take this to apply to whichever community you work with, but you can create norms around it. Who controls the technology? If teacher, you can do things like securely, watchdog, nag, phone jail. I mean, there's things that will monitor media for you. If you're a student, engagement, recordings, TikToks, responsible for phones, to think about, who should be in charge and how we teach about responsible use. Think about integrating technology conversations in schools, in classrooms. talk about how clickbait works. My daughter, they had a 6th grade unit on it in terms of clickbait, and they learned how to write clickbait, introductory statements just to see if they could get people interested. Show the neuroscience behind social media addiction that we talked about, the house of mirrors, the social distortion, trying to act like others, and then plan for those activities to keep students off technology during class time and engage in their learning, games, movement, anything that they can do. And I think that Dee, you're posing the piece here in terms of, teachers don't want phones in there. It is hard to decide, like, what are you going to do about the culture? As a trainer of teachers, the teachers are like, oh man, I'm competing with phones all the time. I'm like, well, maybe we need to get rid of the phones during a certain period of time. No phones allowed in our middle school classrooms is becoming a newer trend. So think about games, movement, etc., music. So what we did, I work on Thursdays, I'm at Carmody Middle School. It's in Jefferson County, Denver metro area. And this year we decided no cell phones. So it was a school-wide policy. So we moved from classroom to school-wide, and they decided the conversation had come up last year. Kids had phones in their rooms all the time. And so this year they created school norms about technologies before and after. What was before, did it work, did it not? And how do we want it to be? And so at the beginning of the school year, they got teachers on board and they said, we're shifting the school culture for 6th, 7th, and 8th. And we're going to say no phones in the classrooms. May you have phones during passing periods. Right now, they're having it during passing periods and during lunch, but none during the school in-class activities, unless there's a specific activity connected. And so I think it's interesting because districts are going all over the place, Dee, in terms of how it's going to work. What we're seeing at our school specifically, we're seeing more engagement. I talked to the principal today, and she said, we have less discipline issues related with the phones because so many times the kids were texting each other and they were escalating middle school problems. She said, so then we have less issues with it, less technology and bathroom related issues as a result of getting rid of it, because kids were texting each other and saying, meet me in the bathroom. You don't even want to know what's happening in those bathrooms. I mean, Pauline's already told us some interesting things that have been happening, but you don't want to know what's happening in some of those bathrooms. And you can go back to middle school and high school and you're like, yeah, that's right. And yeah, parents are often the guilty one. So what ends up happening, that QR code doesn't work for anything. But what we do in our school is we actually use QR codes for bathroom hall passes, counselor passes, so that they can either do it with their phone or their computer. And that's what allows them. And then they can go out, so they're not texting their friends to say, hey, meet me at the bathroom. But we just wanted to show you what we do individual, classroom, school-wide, and obviously everyone has choice. Our message today is really about bringing up the conversation, having the conversation, the scary conversation of what we're seeing with mental health, but also the positive conversation in terms of, technology can be positive. So how do we pair that so it ends up being happening for good? Go ahead, Ariana, put the last slide up there. How much pushback did you give from kids? This is just hilarious. 6th graders found out about it and it passed on to our 7th and 8th graders. 6th graders were at the school a couple days before 7th and 8th graders came to just kind of do a transition into school. They went ahead like wildfire. They went ahead and let all 7th, 8th grade siblings and whatnot know. My daughter gave me an alert that said, there's no cell phones. What am I going to do? It was a spike in terms of anxiety. I'm like, oh my God, my life's going to end. It hasn't. She's still at school. She's like, I'm never going to school ever again because there's no cell phones, and that's just wrong. And so she's quite animated. You're blessed that she didn't come here and sit behind me right now. But it was huge, and so everyone talked about it. but it was interesting because in the car when I have her and her friends, they're like, oh yeah, I feel relieved not to have the cell phone out all the time. And I'm like, wow, that's real, that's honest in terms of how it happens. So push back from the kids a little bit, but not a whole lot. I'm not teaching my student teachers how to say, put the phone away. We don't have those conversations. We're, basically, a month and a half or a month and a couple weeks in, and the kids just follow the rules. We changed the culture, and all the teachers were on the same page. And like, you're not taking my kid's phone. And we don't have the problem, because before it was like taking the phone away, going to the office, this and that. We should not be having to take phones away. That's just, there's so many issues. Obviously, we take phones away during testing period and stuff like that. That becomes a norm in a culture. And so it's about having the conversations, but we're not having to push back. And, the kids are using it during passing period. We're doing some research in terms of whether or not to keep that. They're using it during lunchtime, but it's, yeah, you don't have to be the phone police. Why? That's just stressful for everybody. And as a professor, it's stressful to teach how to be a phone police. It's stressful how to teach all those apps. So with that, thank you for popping in the chat box. We're always available to have these conversations and to email us. We appreciate not having those complaints from the staff at our personal school, that we don't have to have that. And the administration appreciates the fact that kids aren't. Last year, I had kids videotaping teachers. And that's just, then we have to have a whole conversation of who's allowed to be videotaped and whatnot. But with that, we really appreciate your attention today. We so much love this topic, and hopefully that's quite obvious. And we'll pass the baton right back to Ellen.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Caron and Ariana. That was just, I think I experienced, going back to those 4 colors, I think I experienced every emotion during this afternoon's presentation. So, but I think amongst all of this, and Caron, you were sort of referring to this at the end, is that there is, I think, hope around this, that there are potential solutions and ways to utilize social media in a positive way. So thank you for kind of wrapping us up on a hopeful note, as scary as all of that data and that research is. So I'm gonna just quickly add in the chat box, if you want to register for any of our upcoming forums, that link will take you there. And then a feedback survey. So we love to hear feedback from all of you. We always are looking to improve our forums. So grateful for the presenters that we had today. We talked about the foundation of social emotional learning and how critical that is. These are some resources from Generation Schools that we're able to provide everyone. We're going to send this slide deck out afterwards. There's some free social emotional learning units specifically around social media and protecting our privacy. We've got other PDs on SEL topics that have come up in the past and have been recommended to us, as well as some other supports that we can provide in school districts. I think to wrap up, just when you get a chance before you leave, if you're interested in signing up for any other forums coming up, the next one is October 18th on executive functioning. And then in December, we will be doing mindful movement for youth. So for that one, come ready to get ready to move around. And I think both of these topics will be really well attended, and we're excited to have both of those. So yeah, and just the last item is the feedback survey. And I think that's it for tonight. We just really appreciate everyone's time and the conversations that we had. All righty. Anything else, Caron or Ariana?
No, we always kind of like hang behind just in case anyone had any specific questions. But thanks so much for everyone's attention.
Thank you, everybody, for having us today and for participating in our presentation. It's been really fun.